live, but will continue to allow us to take feedback from the community and continue to reincorporate that feedback over the next several years as this plan continues to unfold to make sure that we're continuing to get it right. And so that's a big piece of highlighting here. So I want to walk through really quickly just this introduction section. You can see that the site here is broken down into 5 sections: an intro, a vision, redevelopment opportunities, corridor improvements and enhancements. And then lastly, we'll get into the nitty gritty stuff, which is the implementation with timelines, financing, and how these projects will actually work over the next several years. And so with that, I'll start off with talking about our community engagement. And so many of you over the last several months since last August have participated in our community visioning workshops. Last August, over the course of 5 days, from August 27th to August 30th, we met with well over 650 community members to engage and get feedback through both workshops, through open studio hours, through pinup sessions, through multiple presentations of making sure that we were constantly receiving feedback from the community on the plan, and making sure that as we listened, that we asked ourselves this ongoing question: did we hear you right, and are we getting it right? And so over the course of the last year, since August, we've had in-person community engagement sessions on a monthly basis, highlighting different portions of the plan and really bringing forward things like our priority development sites, understanding the corridor character and urban design feel, and then just getting multiple pieces of feedback from the community on different parts of the plan as it began to unfold. So my hope tonight is that many of the pieces that are shown here tonight are not a surprise to community members who have participated in this process, but a culmination of all of that work that the community has put in over the last year. Several key themes emerged as we went through this process. Working with the community, we created vision maps that the community not only was able to pin up and share ideas of where things were going to be located along the corridor, but there was also a map.social website for people who were not able to participate in person. They were able to go onto the website and give their feedback with the same level of attention and detail that the physical maps provided. So this allowed us to not only engage the roughly 180 attendees that were in our in-person sessions, but also allowed us the opportunity to expand our reach to collect over 600 plus responses from community members that was incorporated into this the feedback of this plan, which we're really excited about. After the series of workshops, what we identified is that there were key themes that began to emerge for most of the community and residents. One of the key things here is improving retail and this desire for a variety of retail development types, including a grocery store, focusing access to fresh food, coffee shop, a bookstore, arcade, bike shop, and other high quality retail opportunities. There was a lot of comments about sit-down restaurants and fast casual restaurants, and not just fast food, but making sure that there's an emphasis on locally attractive options, as well as options that would attract a more regional draw and people into the corridor. Another emerging theme is one of the things that we all love so much about Jefferson-Chalmers is the Vanity Ballroom and historical buildings like the Vanity Ballroom. This was the priority site that was most frequently mentioned, and there was a lot of mentioning of different uses for the Vanity Ballroom, which ranged from entertainment use to having a health club or gathering space for seniors. I never knew Zumba Platinum existed until a lot of the seniors highlighted that that's something that they do regularly, and the Vanity Ballroom would be a great place for that to happen. And so there were a lot of ideas that emerged around the Vanity Ballroom, but this is a consistent theme that has been highlighted throughout the plan. Another major highlight of the plan was the development of a community center and the need for a community and recreation center throughout the corridor. This was both envisioned as part of a larger development and as a standalone center. A lot of The desired amenities for that community center include things like a walking track, a senior center, a gym with a smoothie bar, and the gym, which was most recently used at Faith Church as a community center, but is no longer in use, was often identified as a potential site for that to happen. And we know that that was once used as a gymnasium and a facility that had a lot of youth programming and other activities that the church programmed prior to the church closing. So this is something that has continued to emerge as a growing theme around community center and recreational use. And then housing is a big thing that will continue to string throughout this plan, where there's a heavy importance that's been placed on housing with a priority to redevelopment sites that will emphasize things like tiny home developments, affordable housing, housing particularly for seniors. There are things that were identified as being able to ensure that Jefferson-Chalmers, who has a growing senior population, has the ability for seniors to age in place, to still be able to have a place in the community, and also amenities that support aging in place and services that support that as well. And then ultimately repurposing of abandoned homes directly adjacent to the corridor. And then there was a strong desire and theme around retaining existing businesses such as Riverbend Hardware Supply Store, which is a longstanding amenity in the community and continues to provide a lot of services. A lot of the contracting that happens in the community, especially in our developments, are sourced right here from from the hardware store. And these are really hard to find fixtures and things like that. So we want to make sure that these longstanding existing businesses are not displaced from the community, that as development happens, there's the ability to make sure that facade improvements, code improvements, and things like that are prioritized for existing businesses, and make sure that those existing businesses that are renting are also not priced out of the market as we continue to see development happen in the corridor. The bike lanes became a constant theme here. So there were two views that were often presented on the bike lanes. Many folks identified the benefits of the bike lane, and also including a desire for more lanes, left turn lanes for bikes, and further improvements to the infrastructure for the bike lanes. And then there was another opinion of groups that identified a need for better enforcement around the bike lanes and ensuring that there's education that comes with that around parking on the sidewalk, parking, in between the bike lanes, how the bike lanes should be used, making sure that safety around the bike lanes is prioritized and becomes important. And then understanding how the bike lanes impact congestion as well as traffic patterns in the corridor. And so there's a lot of need to give detail to what happens with the future of the bike lanes, how they continue to be used, but more importantly, how education around the bike lanes and making sure that they're safe and not creating an unsafe environment in the corridor is continued to be promoted. And then there's an emphasis on pedestrian safety. Unfortunately, I cringe every time I see this image of this young family running across the street in the middle of Jefferson, because most of the pedestrian intersections are spread out so far. And so there was a lot of emphasis given to pedestrian safety and ensuring that signage is improved, signaling, crosswalks, and things of that nature to make sure that as traffic moves out of Jefferson and into the Grosse Pointes, and as people are commuting into downtown, that traffic is softened in a way that it creates a safe, walkable environment. And then this theme around infrastructure and utilities, where we know that Jefferson-Chalmers has these beautiful amenities, and it is one of the few communities. It's actually one of the only neighborhoods in Detroit where you truly have riverfront access in the neighborhood. These beautiful canals that come through the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood all the way up to Jefferson, where this sort of terminus is right at Jefferson and Ashland. And so we know that flooding is a key infrastructure concern with residents and has been raised. And so one of the priorities is to focus on infrastructure improvements to these type of amenities, ensuring that there are proper utilities and public infrastructure upgrades that will allow for improved safety in the corridor, and not safety from the perspective of a dangerous corridor, but safety from the perspective of making sure that that there's safe passage for motor traffic, for pedestrian traffic, for bicycling traffic, that the roads are not in disrepair, and that ultimately there's an environment that allows for easy access and for development to happen. And then green space is this other thing that emerges with groups showing a strong desire for green space, including things like pocket parks, pet parks, dog parks, community gardens, street trees, corridor changes, and things like urban farming and promoting that along the corridor with fresh food options to retailers as they come in. Things such as soccer fields, ball fields, splash pads, and ultimately giving access to the canal with a kayak launch potentially from the Fox Creek Park to allow for boating to happen directly, or kayaking to happen directly out of the corridor here. And then coming up on these last few things, corridor character and urban design is very important. Thinking through the historical architecture and character of the corridor and making sure that it's preserved. One of my biggest takeaways from listening at community meetings was hearing a resident say, when you go, anywhere in the country, there's certain identifiable places. Like in Chicago, you have the Magnificent Mile. You're on the Magnificent Mile, and Jefferson-Chalmers is just as unique as any of those places. And what there's a strong desire is to make sure that when you come to Jefferson-Chalmers, it doesn't just feel like anywhere USA, but it really does feel like a place where that it's a unique treasured district. And so cherishing some of the character that currently exists, the historical buildings like the Vanity Ballroom, the Monticello Ballroom, and some of the historic apartments, and employing art and community projects throughout that continue to carry that creativity and heritage that's found in the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood. So lastly, just to orient those on our call who have joined us tonight and may not necessarily be familiar with the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood, to kind of orient you on where we are. This is the city of Detroit. Jefferson-Chalmers is over here in the far southeast corner of Detroit, right before you cross over into the Grosse Pointe neighborhood. And it's a really great kind of transition neighborhood out of the Grosse Pointes into Detroit, where you really do have these great amenities right along the Detroit River. And so this is our neighborhood that we're talking about tonight, is the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood. And then ultimately, we're drilling down into our focus area for this evening, which is the study area bounded by the Alta Road Grosse Pointe border to the east, and then Lenox Street to the west, just beyond River Bend Plaza Shopping Center, and basically compromising a 70-acre district along the East Jefferson corridor in Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood. So to give you a sense of what our existing land use looks like, these colors are all over the map, and so I don't want you to get bogged down in the colors. But one of the really cool things, you can play around in this site. Like I mentioned, it is live, and so after this meeting tonight, if you miss some things, you can go back and play around in here. But one of the cool functions about the site is you can literally click on a particular parcel within the boundary and sort of see some information about that particular parcel, depending on where you are in this. And so there's certain things from the plan that's highlighted based on where you are. You can just click on the parcel to access that information. And then lastly, to really think about some of the zoning uses in the corridor. In other words, how each of these parcels are zoned to be used and to be developed. We have everything in red is B4, which is a business district zoning that allows for density above retail. And so with the traditional Main Street overlay that exists here, and the recent mixtape zoning that was approved by the city of Detroit in the last couple of weeks, it allows for the level of density and sort of these 3-4 stories above retail to be able to happen in the corridor in a way that really builds a walkable sort of Main Street district in this area. And then everything in green here represents a vacant tranche of land that says planned development. So this is the city-owned piece of land that's affectionately referred to as parcel 492. With that, I'm going to transition over to the vision here, and we'll load that up. While we're doing that, I think, Lou, did we have a poll here?
That we do have a poll. So our first poll question, are you a Jefferson-Chalmers or District 4 resident? We'll only take a short moment to do this. So we just kind of want to get a feel for who's on the call.
So while we're loading this next section, if you can take a moment to go ahead and let us know if you're a resident, if you're a business owner, if you operate a business, or if you're just here visiting with us and hanging out. Love to know who's joining us. So we'll leave that open for a few more moments. Looks like quite a few people are responding here. So I want to jump into the vision now. So based on what all the feedback that has gone into the plan over the last few months, we now have developed a vision, ultimately that becomes the community's vision for the corridor. We oftentimes hear the question, well, what is your vision for the Jefferson-Chalmers Mainstreet or for the corridor? And what we always say is the vision is ultimately the community's vision. And so as that unfolds, this is how that's come together over the course of this process. So a lot of guiding themes here, which include things like sustainable development, a comfortable and safe environment or passable environment that allows for safe streets that can be biked across, as opposed to tearing up your car, tearing up your bike as you're biking through the corridor. Context sensitive development that respects the character of the area, and then a diverse mix of both residential and commercial building types, and then ultimately setting a standard for how this future development, sustainable development will happen, and then finally supporting local businesses. So out of this, this brings us to a vision that lays out the corridor into essentially 4 different planning contexts or 4 different areas. And so we'll take a moment and kind of walk through each of these and what they look like in each of their uses. So the far west end of the corridor lends itself to historic mixed-use buildings that essentially run between East Lawn and Newport, where the Vanity Ballroom is. Most of the maps and the imaging that the vision maps that the community created targets this as an area, or identifies it as an area that would be good for more apartments, more inline retail that has a neighborhood focus and directly provides services to the neighborhood. Things like fast casual restaurants, services like a barbershop, salon, dry cleaners, or other small use types that complement what will ultimately be a grocery anchor across the street on the city site. And so again, this portion of the corridor starts to fill in over time, where there is some vacant land that ultimately will be filled in with some development over time. But the existing building types really do lend themselves to a historic flavor, including the Hotel Savarine, which is just on this far west end, is a larger, more historic building. Site 492, as we affectionately call it, in the absence of a better name for a vacant parcel of land. This is a site that the city will partner with the future developer to develop. The concept here calls for full service grocery store to anchor a mixed use development. Ultimately, fresh food grocery is what the community would like to see. And this will then have an infill of row homes, townhomes, or some other sort of incremental development that allows for multifamily use. And then there are also uses in things like a cinema or live entertainment venue, the community center, and other entertainment type uses that the community identify here, as well as green space and incorporating things like early childhood education, as being a part of the final design. And then this also becomes an area where shared parking for the corridor can be supported and provided, as well as stormwater infrastructure for stormwater management throughout the district, and doing that in a way that is integrated well throughout the entire 16-acre development site here that exists on Site 492. And then we have the historic Vanity Ballroom. Again, kind of highlight the Vanity, but the Vanity becomes a part of this larger historic core, which is this really the central core in 5 blocks between Newport and Manistee that really forms the most intact portion of the corridor and serves as its anchor. This area was identified with being the most immediate focus area by community members. This is the area that community members identified the most priority development sites. And so this area should, have buildings that are renovated, historic buildings that are renovated, facade improvement, attracting office space for daytime users that can activate the street, as well as having local serving businesses such as a coffee shop, a bakery, fast casual restaurants, or a pharmacy. In addition to that, to contribute to the core, mixed-use infill and redevelopment should be the focus here at the corner of Jefferson and Chalmers, where there currently exists a big vacant lot, but also centralized parking that would be incorporated into that mixed-use development that also will provide shared parking for the district, and ultimately this historic core serving as a thriving anchor in building a sort of density and a complete street wall. Will allow for the infill or the rest of the district on the east end and the west end to start to fill in with more active businesses. And then the east end was identified for more office uses, residential development should also be a priority in this end, and supporting mixed use development with retail and service providers. This also will provide adaptive reuse of some of the existing buildings, such as the old dealership there that could be converted into residential office and co-working space, as well as making sure that the vacant opportunity sites that exist, such as the Manistee and Jefferson infill intersection here, which we'll talk about that one as a little later as a priority development site, we'll have an opportunity to increase some residential density on the east end of the corridor and provide some activation there as well. So with that, we'll transition into redevelopment opportunities.
And we've got another poll question. This one's a little bit easier than the last one. Do you feel a part of the process? Yes, I would like to do more. No, but I did participate. No, but I'm interested, and other.
All right, so as that's loading, again, the vision really was us getting out what the community saw as the vision, where the key opportunities existed in the corridor, and now giving us the opportunity to say, where now can redevelopment happen in the corridor and where are these redevelopment opportunities? So the community identified several sites in Jefferson-Chalmers that deserve to be highlighted and ultimately contribute to the redevelopment, sort of these catalytic sites that can spark redevelopment in the corridor. So these are, here's a map of where each of those sites exist. Everything in orange represents a rehab site, or a site where there's an existing building that can be repurposed or is a constructive rehab, adaptive reuse. And then everything in red is a vacant site that should be an opportunity site for new development, new construction to happen along the corridor. So for the adaptive reuses, again, these are historic buildings that currently exist, and there needs to be priority given to preserving and preservation of existing historic assets on the corridor. We can't highlight enough how important it is to preserve those existing assets, but also how difficult it is to replicate those types of assets should you have to do new construction. And then, of course, the priority development sites set the stage for what new construction will look like as new investment comes into the corridor to activate what are vacant sites. So with that said, there's several key sites that we brought to the community to make sure that these were the right priority development sites. Did we hear right? Did we get these right? And going through a series of saying, what are the highest and best uses of those sites? How do we make sure they're rehabbed in a way that they're incorporating the right uses, the right amenities, surveying the community on each of those, and then getting a positive response? We waited until we got a 90% response of either agree or strongly agree with things like the character, the design, and ultimately how it turns out before we put pencil to paper to start thinking through the numbers on each of these. So the Vanity Ballroom, which again, we all love and adore, as well as the adjacent bike shop, is the highest priority redevelopment site identified. And in its future use, transitioning from its current use to a future use, the restoration of the Vanity now proposes a revitalized venue that can be supported by at grade level restaurant, as well as retail that activates the first floor, the first 15,000 square feet. So the ballroom becomes reactivated at its 15,000 square feet, as well as providing adjacent parking that supports the Vanity, as well as adjacent development around the Vanity Ballroom. This is roughly a $14 to $18 million project, of which there's a bit of a substantial gap on it that we talk about a little later in the implementation, how some of those gaps begin to be filled. And then the Schwinn Bike Shop also gets a reactivation as part of phase 2 of developments. And that 7,200 square feet is reactivated with retail on the first floor, and then the offices of JEI, Jefferson East, and EJ Devco goes back into the corridor in this building. So as many of you know, JEI moved out of its old Jiba office that it had been in for several years in order to rehab that for Norman G's Caribbean Restaurant to open. So this gives an opportunity for JEI to get back on the street in a more permanent, long-term basis outside of the neighborhood resource center that will come online in the next couple of months. And then that brings us to the Marlboro and Jefferson infill site on the corner of Marlboro and Jefferson, across from the Marlboro apartments that are currently under construction. This is the current state of that site, where the old liquor store exists and the very derelict White Sun building. And so its future use moves it to add a little bit more density to the site and ultimately produce a mixed use development here that provides for residences, of which there's roughly proposed to be 15 to 25 units, residential units on the site, supported by parking as well, and retail, first floor retail that's activated, as well as adjacent plaza space that ultimately creates a street wall between the bank and the development. So this is priority development site number 2, which is also proposed in phase 2. And then there's the Faith Church adaptive reuse, which again, recently the church closed, sold to a developer that has proposed redeveloping it into residential and multifamily. And so the future use of that reactivates the church itself as a residential building. The annex also is proposed for residential, but again, through this process, we've heard a good deal of feedback from community about the rear space being activated, or the old annex being activated as a community center. So we're in talks with the developer to see how the feasibility of that can work with the development project. And have continued to sort of stay abreast with community members on how this process will work. And so as proposed, it's a roughly $23 million development that would bring online between 60, 75 new units, targeting 30 between 30 and 50% of those units being affordable to the neighborhood as well, which is, again, a big priority of the plan, is to ensure that newly developed units target a high level of deep affordability. And then lastly, the last priority development site is the Manistique and Jefferson infill, which is located catty corner from Norma G's restaurant, right on the corner of Manistique and Jefferson. This is the old, where old Firestone used to exist, and incorporates a building owned by an existing resident in the neighborhood, community member. And so this gave us an opportunity to help an existing resident activate their building as part of a larger development and give them access to a development partner with an opportunity to really build some scale. So on this site is proposed a mixed use development again here with 52,000 square feet of development, retail on the first floor, totaling 13,000 square feet, and then 3 stories of residential above. That gives us roughly between 35 and 45 residential units that are proposed here, and adjacent parking as well on this site that will support the development. This development is projected around $12 to $15 million in total development costs as well. So this rounds out all of the priority development sites. And again, over the course of the last several months with community meetings, we brought these development sites back to the community with these proposed numbers and total square footage, with the design, to get direct feedback on each of these and understand where did we get it right, and do these developments make sense, and then take it a step further to say what type of amenities, what type of uses make the most sense in each of these developments based on what we know are use types that the community wants to see and needs to see. So with that, I think we have another poll question as we transition to talking about corridor improvements.
And our poll question is around housing. Do you know someone from the community who needs housing? So if you know someone and you want to be contacted, yes, contact me about it. If you don't know someone, but you just want the information in case you run across somebody, no, but please share the information with me.
All right.
Yeah.
So we'll leave that open till we get about at least an 80% response on that.
Mm-hmm.
So now we get into corridor improvements and enhancements, and we're almost through this. So again, continue to ask your questions in the Q&A box, and whatever questions don't get answered by the team, we'll open up shortly for Q&A. So as far as corridor improvements are concerned, these are dealing with public improvements in the right of way, above and beyond what exists today. And again, this really cool tool and cool map that you'll have an opportunity to play around once you get on the site will allow you to click on things on this map to be able to know what each of these types of improvements are. So some of these things are, as simple as planting a tree. I clicked on a tree and it tells me that's a tree. But some things are a little bit more advanced, like, where pedestrian crossings go, where wayfinding and signage is, where community members identified key areas for crossings, pedestrian crossings for intersections, things of that nature. And then, on the far east end, things like enhancements to the public park, the Fox Street Park that exists there. And so we'll walk through some of these here and talk about what some of these look like based on the community's feedback of where these things should go. One of the biggest pieces of ensuring growth happens in the corridor is sort of shoring up the street wall, and I've used this term a few times, and so I don't want to take for granted that everyone understands what street wall means, but this is a term that simply describes a continuous row of buildings that are side by side, that are not vacant storefronts, but they're located near the sidewalk. They have little or no setback from the curb, and ultimately create sort of this contiguous set of buildings or public spaces that complete a street wall. And so the success of the corridor really, as community members have, sort of outlined, is that there's a lot of vacant buildings that break up sort of the contiguous nature. So there's a big need to fill in the street wall in a way that provides for that density. And that also means repairing the road and things along each of these blocks and intersections so that these can start to fill in. Then we get to this roadway network and streetscape. The way that most people use the corridor is through the roadway, whether it's walking, biking, taking the public transit and the bus that comes through the corridor. So ultimately, investing in the design, the construction, and maintenance of this is very important. So there's a lot of public right-of-way improvements that are planned for the corridor that ultimately will help to strengthen the investment as it comes. Now, what we didn't do is go into a deep dive of saying what exactly those are in this planning process, because the city has done a good job of going through its framework plan to identify what those improvements are all the way down Jefferson, and those large public improvements are slated to begin by the city in 2021. And so this plan does not sort of throw that out the door. This plan incorporates that and complements it and says above and beyond the key framework things that the city has planned to do, what are additional key improvements that can happen in the corridor that's outside of the scope of what the city will do in the right of way. Again, that framework plan from the city talks about pilot nodes like at Jefferson-Chalmers, enhancing the bus stop here and creating an enhanced bus stop, as well as beefing up bike lanes, pedestrian refuge islands, making those bike lanes more passable and safer, raised medians in the corridor for things like bus boarding, and then more protection for pedestrians with landing zones for pedestrians in the middle of the roadway. I think I was crossing at Jefferson a few hours ago earlier today, and the crosswalk sign gave me 25 seconds to cross, and I think I'm a relatively young guy, and I didn't make it across in the 25 seconds. So there has to be some beef up of what safe passage looks like, especially for our seniors who are crossing, as well as children and other folks. And then green streets and alleys. So when we talk about safe passage of roadways, we're not talking about public safety, because for most residents of Jefferson-Chalmers, they would tell you that Jefferson-Chalmers is a really great place to live. Folks feel safe in the neighborhoods and in the community passing through the neighborhood. But your car, for instance, may not feel safe going down one of the alleys or the potholes that exist up and down the north and south vacated alleys. And so we know that flooding is a big issue in the corridor. So the alleys will be enhanced in a way to create both green alleys that provide for stormwater management and runoff, but also functional alleys that are activated with things like permeable pavement, asphalt, and become living streets running up and down the corridor, both north and south of Jefferson. We talked about intersections and crosswalks, so I won't continue to beat that dead horse. But again, this is what an intersection improvement will look like. Currently, no crosswalk here at this intersection, but simply doing some improvements, and some signage will allow for some signaling and safe passage for pedestrians to cross Jefferson. So these are, the site gives a lot of examples of what these crosswalk improvements can look like, what these key intersection enhancements will look like. Some of these, in addition to those type of improvements, there's also things like where there's existing amenities such as the Jefferson Car Wash, which is a long-standing business on the corridor. I heard someone say, well, should the car wash go away? Should the car wash stay in a dense environment? It's like, no, car wash is a great amenity. And it's also, a longstanding existing business in the corridor. But are there things that we can do to sort of beef up and improve the street scape and make some enhancements and improvements around the car wash as community members have identified. So those are the type of improvements that have been laid out as well. And then parking. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes on parking because I'm pretty sure and I'm certain that at least 3 or 4 of our community meetings that parking became a key discussion item, and making sure that not only is there enough parking, but that the parking is accessible, the parking is secured, is safe, and it's accessible off of the corridor. And so we've done a really comprehensive, detailed analysis on the parking, both identifying, using the maps to really identify where existing pain points for parking exist, but then also showing where future development will happen, that there's a need for parking to come online prior to that development in order to support it. So based on we looked at 2 things. We looked at both the zoning requirement for parking, but then we also looked at sort of what we call the developer desire or user desire for parking. So there's a difference between whether the zoning code calls for 20 spaces of parking and whether or not the restaurant user of a building says, I'll need on a busy weekend, I'll need upwards of 50 parking spaces. And so taking into account all of the shared parking district and an analysis around everything that's developed, there's parking that will begin to come online in phases. And so phase 1, which is already under construction or completed. So these dates represent construction starts. So not completion, but construction starts. So phase 1, which are things like Norma G's restaurant, the Kresge building, Marlboro Apartments, there's 77 spaces that will come online or have come online as a result of those developments happening. So as phase 2 begins to come online, with the addition of phase 2, there will be roughly 374 spaces. Phase 3 adds additional parking, phase 4, phase 5, to give us a total of 2,000 spaces of parking. And so we also looked at this by planning area. So if you remember the vision slide, this breaks down into looking at the west end, where it makes the most sense to sort of populate parking in a shared area that supports the west end uses, the historic court uses, and then the east end uses, as well as there's parking that's added for the parcel 492 development as well. So parking is addressed greatly here in the plan. Some examples of on-street parking as we see it currently with the new striping adjacent to the bike lanes, and continue to make sure that it's striped well and it's done in a way that ensures there's not bikers that are hitting cars or doors that are opening and getting taken off by adjacent traffic. And then there's improvements that can happen to off-street parking, where we currently see some of the parking lots that are here, and just providing some screens and buffers to just sort of enhance and beautify the parking elements that already currently exist. And then as far as transit, Jefferson-Chalmers already has really good transit that moves through with a few bus routes that move through through the East Jefferson corridor. And so the plan really just highlights, sort of beefing up those already existing multimodal points. And so kind of following with the city's framework plan, again, the city's framework plan addresses that in a good deal of detail. And so we don't go into a lot of detail of talking about that, but really rely on the city's plan that shows some of these improvements, beefing it up, and then thinking about what happens above and beyond that. And then there's public gathering spaces. So, activating the street in a way that people really want to be in the public realm, and especially making sure that as we're walking, there's sort of distractions that catch your attention, like some of the public art on vacant buildings. So in the meantime, while buildings are coming online, activating some of these buildings with decorative board up and things of that nature, to really create a vibrant public realm, but then also cleaning up things like planters along the corridor where all of those exist. And so some examples of some pedestrian amenities that were highlighted by community members were things like making sure that there's bike parking racks, that the pavers along East Jefferson are maintained and replaced, and that they don't create tripping or fall hazards. And then the installation of public art along the corridor, as well as other public gathering spaces that create activations and allow for interactions to happen along the corridor. I will say, if you've driven past the Kresge building, there's a really, our outdoor patio that's there and green space that's there, which is intended for future use for tenants. But has recently been activated by community members who have thought creatively to have an outdoor patio gathering. And so that's a really good example where some of the existing businesses and neighbors have just used that as a small activation to just come out and enjoy the street front and really activate the street. And so there's opportunities to do more of that up and down the corridor. And so a lot of those are identified. And then gateways and wayfinding. So here, this is, I'll pause for a second. This is an intersection coming into Jefferson from downtown. And so really, community members, a lot of communities pointed out, like making sure that there's some type of moniker or identifier that shows where you are in the city of Detroit, and that you've made your arrival into this historic treasure neighborhood in Jefferson-Chalmers. And so there's different examples of gateways, and these are some of the things that we'll dig into. We'll talk about focus groups a little later, and how community members will have an opportunity to really help define what these public wayfinding signage and things like that look like as they're implemented. And then just additional wayfinding as well, to not only orient you where you are as far as Jefferson-Chalmers, but once you're in the district, really highlighting some of the key assets like the Vanity Ballroom, where some historical buildings are, where the canals are, and just kind of finding your way through the neighborhood. So with that, I'll wrap up the comments on the corridor improvements and enhancements, and we'll get to the final piece here, which is the implementation and phasing. So while we're doing that, I think Lou's going to launch another survey here, which asks the question that we will continue to hear, which is, did we get it right? And did we hear you right? And so I appreciate those that have participated in the process, who are answering yes or no, somewhat neutral. And then those who have not been a part of the process, I appreciate you for sharing that you were not a part of the process, but you do like or don't like the plan. All right, so the last piece is the implementation, phasing, and financing. And this is where all of the hard work really goes, is how do we get it done? So what we wanted to make sure is that we did not just create a plan that, that really sort of, is aspirational, but really has the ability to be implemented. And so we break it down into 5 phases. And so what the site shows as you go in, you play around, are these screenshots, which is from a larger model, which I will take you through here in a second. But it breaks each of these phases down to show here job creation by phase. So you can see here both permanent jobs that's created and temporary jobs that are created by these developments. Shows the total land use. So, red is a mixed use building, for instance. Purple is a restaurant. I know some of these are kind of small to read. And then the bronze is multifamily. And so 23 units come online in this first phase. And so these are the marble apartments that you see in bronze, both north and south. The purple, again, being the restaurant use, that's Norma G's, that has come online. And then the red building being the Kresge building. So those are all phase 1 projects. Yellow Light Donut also is a phase 1 project, and Yellow Light Donut has come online as well. So this helps us understand total development costs over here for each phase as well. So again, this first phase is roughly $9.9 million of development that's either complete or will be completed by the end of this year, with Marlboro Apartments coming online, as well as Kresge building in the next few months. And we get into phase 2, which are projects that will start construction this year and next year. So we do have 2 projects that will kick off construction this year. 14522 East Jefferson, which is over here in Orange, has some retail and mixed use, and 14326, which is here, another retail building. Those 2 will start construction this year. And then next year, some of the multifamily buildings that you see in bronze, infill, site and developments, and some other users, some other buildings will begin to activate uses as well. So these are all a part of phase 2, and the phase 2 represents projects that really are what we call shovel ready. Financing is in place, and for the most part, gaps have been identified, and finalizing those sources for what those funding gaps will be. And so in total, this represents about $107 million in development for phase 2 that will kick off this year and next year, activating roughly 900 jobs, of which a good deal of those will be permanent jobs that meet the inclusive neighborhood development timeline and principles. And then we have our land use, which shows a total activation of about 183,000 square feet across these uses, 257,000 square feet in total, 117 residential units. Again, with a good deal of those prioritizing affordable housing units, and then ultimately moving us into phase 3. So phase 3 developments are proposed construction starts between 2022 and 2024. So this is where things like development along parcel 492 is sort of proposed and showing opportunities for that to be able to happen here. You see some of the infill development that begins to happen and begins to pick up with roughly 309 new units coming online, 48 permanent jobs. 1,779 total jobs with a combination of permanent jobs, and ultimately $129 million in development. Phase 4 and 5 are a little bit more, these are a little bit more visionary and aspirational because they do require the implementation of phase 2 and 3 for those to be successful to really generate, some of the rest of these infill developments to happen. So, based on, the success in phase 2 and 3, then some of the timing of phase 4 and 5 developments could move up sooner, but there's a good deal of these that are projected over a 5-year period from 2025 to 2030. And then moving into the last phase, you begin to see a little bit more infill in the corridor happen to create essentially a larger district of development that fills in across all 5 phases. We're looking at a period of about 17 years, so through 2037 for construction starts to happen, ultimately contributing to roughly $600 million in development. So the really cool thing that I want to sort of point out is this really cool tool that, if I went too fast for you, or if you didn't get a chance to see everything you want to see on the site, you'll be able to really play around in what's called this corridor view of the model. And so this is the tool that we will continue to use at all the community meetings to really show you how development as it unfolds in the corridor impacts different things. And so we'll be able to model real-time buildings. You'll be able to, sort of zoom in here and see where different things are going to happen. So, as these buildings are sort of popping up, you can see I can click here, and this will tell me exactly what this is. So this is the Vanity Ballroom. It tells me, things like total square footage, the amount of parking that goes into the site. So let me click on this one because it's colored. So the Kresge building, for instance, which is a phase 1 project, 6,000 square feet. It tells me, how many stories, how many parking spaces are here, and then how many jobs exist and are created at this particular building. So it's a really cool tool that you'll get an opportunity to go in, play around. This will stay live as it's updated in real time. You'll see those updated changes. You can kind of play around, zoom in, zoom out. You'll also be able to, sort of select what phase of development is currently happening. You can change the layers. So I want to add phase two, I can add phase two projects, and you see those. Phase three, I can begin to see those fill in. Phase four, phase five, and so on. And so you can get a sense of what the complete district looks like. You want to zoom in all the way down to street level, which I won't get into now, but there's a tool where you can actually see street level, how tall are buildings, what will those buildings look like. And so in real time, we can discuss things as a community moving forward about density levels and how buildings, as new buildings come online, was that too dense? Does it make enough sense? Should we come back and look at some of the future phases to readjust those? So I encourage you to really get into the tool and jump around and explore. And finally, on this funding development piece, this is the financial feasibility of phases 2 and 3. So again, this takes a deeper dive into how the numbers look. And so one of the things that we've been very transparent and intentional about is showing the community how we fund these deals and how much it costs to develop them, and where these sources of fundings are coming from. And so there's this shows phases 2 and 3, which is roughly $230 million in development, of which $24 million of that roughly is equity that will be raised for the project. And I'm going to talk in a short second about what that looks like. There's a combination of debt sources that will have to go into this to make it work. So combination of lenders and senior debt, tax increment financing debt, and construction loans and things of that nature. And then there's this total gap where projects don't work deep in the neighborhoods in the traditional development sense. So we have to get creative with how we fill these gaps. And so what we've done is gone through both of these phases to identify sources to fill this $51.4 million gap. So on the site, it goes into a little bit more detail about each of these sources. We've presented many of the community meetings, the targeted redevelopment area, which is the key catalytic piece to filling the gap on many of these projects, especially around those public infrastructure improvements, demolition activities, brownfield approval, cleanup of sites and environmental activities. The TRA will really allow us to be able to make sure that many of those public benefits, shared parking and things of that nature can really happen consistent with the community's vision. Some of the other sources is really aligning with the Strategic Neighborhood Fund with the City of Detroit. And this is a strategic neighborhood, or is a strategic neighborhood as part of the SNF fund. And so this is one of the 10 neighborhoods that's been designated to receive funding. And so we work very closely with our partners at the city, as well as Ed Invest Detroit, who administers that fund, to make sure that the community's priorities around priority development sites start to really show where those limited resources can actually go and make the most impact and see the most value for the community. And then there are other grant sources like Eagle grants that we've been able to acquire to do some environmental cleanup. There's the Home Fund for Affordable Housing, which will need to be tapped for many of these projects. New market tax credits, which are tax credit equities like new market and historic tax credit that will go into many of these deals. And then working very closely with MEDC, the state, and MISHDA to provide other additional grants as well to round out the rest of where that $51 million gap comes from. So those are all of the sources. And then lastly, getting into this development scorecard that really tells us if we're going to do a development. And so the community really helped to put this together. And over the next few months, we're going to continue to redefine this and make sure that this really is the tool that allows us to assess whether or not a development makes sense for the community. And so there were many guiding themes and things that we wanted to make sure we gauge a development by, to say, before a developer moves forward on that development opportunity, let's score it and let's make sure that it does meet the community's goals, that it promotes inclusivity, and it meets the inclusive development principles and standards. So with that, I take a deep breath, and that is the full plan as it rolls out and the vision as communicated by the community. And so with that, I want to take a pause, and I think we have one more survey, Lou?
We do. I'm
One more
launching it
survey
now.
as I transition to what our next steps are after this.
So we want to know what part of the presentation you would like to hear more about. So as we start talking in the future about what we're doing, like which area of this you feel needs more attention, or you need more information about, or you feel like you saw it on the website, but you still might have questions.
All right. So I see people starting to weigh in and respond here.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. So while that's happening, I want to go ahead and talk about the next steps. So, what happens from here? What are the things that the community will be doing? Do we stop? And so this process is not a sort of singular exercise where we've gone through this master planning and now we're done and that's it. We're gonna kind of work and go into a shell now. But this is where the real work begins, and where we have to start making sure that the community has an opportunity to help continue to inform the plan. So while I'm waiting for the presentation to come back up here, I'll talk through a couple of these pieces. Number one is we will begin to not only continue to have our monthly community meetings that will meet usually the fourth Thursday of every month, which right now will continue to happen virtually, but we will also begin to form focus groups that allow us to give opportunity for individuals who want to dig into specific aspects of the plan as we go into implementation mode to really help us implement those different aspects of the plan. So those focus group areas are aligned around things like specific development sites, historic character of the corridor, making sure that there's preservation that's consistent with the community's values, things like there's already a design standard for the historical district, but making sure that as the character of the district moves forward, that there's weigh-in from community members on how that continues to evolve. And so if you're interested in a particular focus group, what we'll do is not only acknowledge those or announce those on a monthly basis in the community meetings, but we will also leave those posted on the EJ DevCo website, as well as on the master planning site, so that you'll have an opportunity to know what those are, sign up, know when those meetings are, and have an opportunity to participate in those. The other piece is working to continue to redefine these, which are inclusive neighborhood development principles. These are essentially things that we require when folks come into the corridor to either access retail space or do development. And so we promote things like local contracting, local hiring, accessible price points, job creation, and making sure that there's affordable housing. And so there's a big need around making sure that there's a group that continues to say, what are the things that we are most concerned about from the perspective of displacement, from the perspective of making sure that we have an inclusive environment for our neighborhood, and making sure that Detroiters are prioritized and not displaced or left out of the process. And as we continue to hear of concerns, we'll continue to put different tools in place that will help us mitigate some of those effects. So this is a list of all the focus groups that you have an opportunity or will have an opportunity to participate in. And one big one that I would like to highlight is the Young People's Group, which is an opportunity for youth engagement. around the planning and making sure that there's a youth voice at the table as part of the implementation of this plan. Now, I'm really, excited to talk about this other piece, which, is a really big takeaway that we've begun to have conversations with community members about, and stick to a commitment that we've made early on, which is the idea of buying back the block. And so, as development happens, as you've seen in phase 2, that there's roughly phase 2 and 3, there's roughly 23 or $24 million in equity that will be raised. Of that, we want to give opportunities to the community to have direct ownership in development projects that happen in their community. What oftentimes happens is that outside investment comes in, and those investors participate in projects as there's development and growth, and investors benefit from that. That money leaves our neighborhood, and oftentimes does not get reinvested back in our neighborhood, but oftentimes leads to displacement of existing Detroiters. We, from the very small retail building that will come online to the larger developments, will begin to facilitate opportunities for community members to participate in ownership of each of those developments and properties as they come online. We have not completely evolved what that looks like on each of the projects, but over the next several weeks, over a series of the next couple of months, you'll hear a lot more information about that. So again, if you're interested, I think we're going to have a way to collect information for those that are interested, but we want to continue to make sure that we give you that opportunity. And so I think, Lou, with that, I think there's a poll for that.
That's our next poll question, actually.
Okay. So I think
it's a two-part question.
So we'll launch that in a second for those that are interested. But the last piece is EJ Devco, the development arm of Jefferson East, has and Jefferson East has always had resident representation. And so there is always a longstanding commitment to make sure that the organizations continues to reflect the community. The Devco board is made up of residents from along the East Jefferson corridor, so not just the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood, but all of the neighborhoods along East Jefferson that we service. Paulette Foster, who's one of the founding members of both JEBA and the Development Corporation, recently stepped down from the Devco board to sort of enjoy life, and after putting in almost 30 years of work in the neighborhood, has given us a great deal of time and effort. And so she thought it was befitting, and we think so as well, to make sure that we select a resident from the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood who will actually have a seat and assume that seat on the Devco board. And so over the next couple of months, or the next couple of weeks, I should say, into the next community meeting, we'll be working with community groups. Many of you we've already talked to about the selection process for identifying a resident representative that will come onto the board and help provide additional agency to the community, but will also, in addition to Lou and myself and others, give you just another voice and another representative to bring direct feedback to what we're doing and provide some decision-making ability. So with that, Lou, let's go ahead and launch that last poll. And I know we're running up against sort of our wrap-up time here.
So this is a two-part question. The first part is, would you be interested in being an equity investor? And the second part is, at what level?
So two questions there. So for those that say, yes, I would love to have ownership in projects and have an interest level, and then at what level would your interest be at? Take a moment and fill those in. So on the screen, again, these are the ongoing, we will continue to have ongoing office hours. The master plan will be posted on the EJ Devco website, ejdevco.com. And so with that, I want to go ahead and, while you're filling out the poll, move into the Q&As. And so I know behind the scenes, I think questions have started to be answered. So Lou, if there's any open questions that you want to start shooting my way, we'll open the floor for questions. So again, if you have a question, we'll have you go into the Q&A and insert your question there in the Q&A section.
Marcus has been answering the questions with lightning efficiency. There are a bunch of questions here that have been answered that maybe you may want to readdress, but he's done a really good job of answering a lot of the questions.
All right. Any that you want to highlight?
There were questions around the Kresge building, and have we identified a tenant, and what are we doing in regards to the Kresge building?
Hey, that's a great question. So the Kresge building is set to be complete. I think there's a slide in here where we'll sort of, actually, let me just go ahead and jump ahead. So to the Kresge building. So the Kresge building is set to be complete in the next month. Was through there today, and it's wrapping up some of the final like punch list items on the JEI rear space that will house the neighborhood resource hub. The front restaurant space will be built out for a restaurant tenant, and so we're still seeking a restaurant tenant. So we've identified a few prospective restaurant tours and restaurant tenants that we're working with. Our priority again is to work with both businesses that are neighborhood facing, neighborhood serving, and particularly working with entrepreneurs that are coming from the neighborhood and from the community as our highest priority. In the absence of a neighborhood restaurant tenant, really prioritizing a restaurateur that meets those inclusive neighborhood development principles. So the space is available for lease now. If you have questions about the space or are interested in an opportunity, you can reach out to Amanda, our real estate coordinator. Her contact information is here on the screen, or you can always send us an email or connect with us online, and we'll get you to the right person.
The next question we had was about housing. We talked about housing, and the question is, does housing equal any type of housing?
Yeah, so great question. So when we talk about housing, we're talking about just housing in general. I'm going to go back to this inclusive neighborhood development principle slide because one of the priorities for housing is to make sure that there's a level of affordability that meets the deep affordability needs for Jefferson-Chalmers. So we know that the city has a requirement, which is providing affordability at what's called 80% AMI, which and for lack of using technical terms is really that's really a market rate rent in the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood. And so there's a need for some deeper levels of affordability at 60 and 50% AMI and even 30% AMI. So when we talk about housing, there's an assumption that at a very minimum, 30% of that housing will target affordable units at deep affordability levels. But the goal is to deliver at 50% of each mixed income development having a mix of affordable housing in it. That also is something where the focus group around inclusive development, as the plan continues to unfold, as the demands for affordability decrease or increase, that we're continuing to look at that to say, do we need to adjust that requirement in a way to not oversaturate with affordable housing or to ramp up more affordable or market rate housing because there's a larger demand for it. So those are things that we'll continue to monitor as a community. I'll also say it's a combination of mixed use housing, so multifamily, as well as single family housing.
There's another question. What is the value proposition for potential developers in the Jefferson-Chalmers corridor?
So when you talk about value proposition, I want to preface this comment because I'll channel some of the inner residents who are always concerned about new development presenting an opportunity for displacement. Really, the value proposition is to come into an emerging neighborhood in an emerging market where We know that there's a large demand for both retail uses as well as units to come online, particularly both market and affordability. We know the existing units that are online have a large waiting list. We just launched our waiting list for the 23 units at the Marlboro Apartments that'll come online this year, and that the list is already just kind of blown up to show that there's really a large demand for bringing on good quality housing in the neighborhood. But I preface that with saying, there's also a desire to partner with developers that will come in and buy into the community's vision to deliver projects that meet the community's vision, does not, displace existing businesses or existing residents, but really does all the things that are laid out in the community's vision and plan, and has a true desire to really partner with the community as we move forward. So from a value proposition area, we've done a lot of the heavy lifting with really identifying not only the existing conditions, but identifying the gaps that exist in the market, as well as the resources to fill those gaps. And so what we've asked for in return for developers who come in and who will have an opportunity ultimately to benefit from all of those resources is that in order to access, these pot of resources, that you really do have to buy into this community vision and sign on to do these things that the community has highlighted. And so, if you don't have a desire to do that, and you come in, you decide to develop, great. If you can get it done, we welcome you to come get it done. But in order to access resources that will enable you to get that done, the fair aspect to the community is to do it in a way that's consistent with this plan.
Hey, Derek, we've got another question. Someone's asking about canals and waterfront access and how that's related to the plan.
Yeah, so most of the canals are not directly within the focus area of the master plan, which really focuses on the commercial corridor, with the exception of the fact that the main canal there, terminus is right at Jefferson and Ashland at the bridge there at Fox Street Park. And so there's a desire from the community, as highlighted, to see if there's the ability to access a public access to that canal, which then gives a public access from Jefferson to ultimately to the riverfront, and add some connectivity there. But outside of that, really, our focus area really only focuses on that part of the water access in the canals.
There's a question on the table. What is the current asking price on the Marlboro units?
I think Marcus is answering questions. So Marcus, if you can help me out with that one, I know there's a range on, looks like you beat me to it. So the Marlboro Apartments has a range. I think on the low end, there's 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units there. So some larger unit types for families. I think they're ranging on the low end. And Marcus, please confirm, between $650 on the low end. And I think 3 bedrooms going into like the 12 or 1300 on the high end on the market rate units.
Hey, Lou and Derek, this is Josh. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you, Josh.
All right. I saw one of the questions floating through there was kind of related to the canals, but what's JEI doing to support the flooding issues? And while not directly related to this plan, what I can say is we are aggressively pushing for the longer term solution for the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood with the seawall fix. So we're sort of in constant contact with federal, state, and local officials to try to identify the resources for the long-term fix. So it's very high on our radar as an organization. I just wanted to sort of reiterate that. So.
All right, great. Thanks, Josh. So with that, I think we've answered all of the open questions. I want to reiterate that our team, has done a good job of trying to make sure that we've incorporated all of the feedback that we've gotten. Again, this is a living plan, and we will continue to update it. So I really want to pause for a moment and just really celebrate the EJ Devco team, to Marcus King, who really led this effort on behalf of our organization. He's our in-house architect who grew up in the Island View neighborhood and came back to Detroit to do a good deal of work here. So we want to thank Marcus for his hard work in really getting this across the finish line. Lou, who's our engagement guru and has made sure that all of the technical stuff works, including that the web that you see. Being able to go through that. Lou is really the person. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to Lou. Send him an email, give him a call. If you have never interacted with Lou, he's the most friendliest guy you ever want to meet. And he knows a whole lot of stuff and a whole lot of people. Lou's always making sure that the community's voices is come back to our weekly development meetings so that we can make sure that we're incorporating the feedback that we hear. And then Amanda as well on our team, and David Howe, our real estate manager, all who have done a great job of keeping this moving. In addition to the JEI team who continues to support all of the work in the neighborhood, Josh and the team there. And so with that, I want to turn it back over to Lou for us to sign off. Again, if you have future questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. The website will be live at ejdefco.com. So I encourage you to go and look through the plan as well. And I think, Lou, we should be able to share the plan with the link here or the link to the plan with everyone on the call here. So we'll share that so that you have the opportunity to go out at your leisure. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lou to close us out with some final announcements. I think this is
final announcements. The Neighborhood Resource Hub, they're still doing phone intake only. And their phone number is posted here, 313-314-6414, or you can email them at neighborhoodserviceshub@jeffersoneast.org. Also,
That's it. I think that's it.
So, yeah, go to the next slide. Marlboro Apartments. We are in the process of doing a wait list for Marlboro Apartments. Definitely, we have I'm losing my words today. We have a company that is helping us to get people into these units. We are showing preference towards people who are already from the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood. So we want to get you guys on a wait list. There are some affordable units that are available. Please contact us for more information. We can definitely share that with you. And then finally, the Kresge building. And Derek touched on this a little bit earlier, but the Jefferson East is going to be in the back end of that building. And the front end, we're still looking for tenants. If you know somebody that's from the community that serves a mean brisket or has a good concept that could go in a restaurant, we would really like to have a restaurant in this neighborhood, in that space. So just contact Amanda Hardy. She's our real estate coordinator. Her contact information is here on the screen. And I've got one last poll, if y'all don't mind, asking about what steering committee you might be interested in. I know there's some big, long names in there. Consider getting on a steering committee, because that's how we drive the conversation. That's how we find out what people want. That's how we find out how to have inclusive development. So if you're interested in arts and culture, definitely put yourself down there and we can reach out to you and we'll put some committees together. If you're interested in public space, definitely mark that. If you're interested in the design, we had one person who asked a couple of questions about shipping containers. There may be people who are interested in that and there may be people who are not, but if you're on that committee, then you can be a part of the conversation. Other than that, I think that's all of our announcements.
Hey, thank you, Lou. So with that, again, I want to thank everybody so much for taking your time out on a busy week, busy Thursday evening. I hope everyone is staying safe. I hope everyone is practicing social distancing and all of those good things to make sure that our families continue to remain healthy and strong. Really wish that we could see you in person. We look forward to the opportunity where we can continue to do that in the future. I miss getting my hugs from my community members. Minnie Lester gives some of the best hugs, and many of you here. So I think Minnie Lester, actually, she's still on. Minnie Lester was supposed to speak earlier, and I see her now as a panelist. So I don't want to overlook the opportunity to allow Miss Lester to be able to share. So I'm going to unmute her, and let's see if she's still on. Miss Lester, are you here?
Yes, I am.
All right, I can hear you. I would love for you to go ahead and share.
Well, I agree with everything that you have said today. It has been. I'm starting to have some interference here.
We're getting a little feedback. I don't know if you have two speakers on or two devices on. You may have to mute the other one.
Just a moment. Let me take this one out. Let me just cut it off. You speaking now while I'm gone.
Yeah, we're getting a little echo. Did she go away? Oh, wait a minute. She was using two devices.
Okay, I think we may have lost her from the first device.
Yep, and I just pulled her up on the second one.
All right, perfect. All right. If you can hear us, Miss Lester, you have to unmute. Looks like you're on mute, but you have speaking privileges.
Okay.
There she is.
One thing I was going to say is it was a wonderful presentation. We've been in this area. I've been here in Jeff-Chalmers since 1973. My husband been in Jeff-Chalmers ever since the 40s. And so this is a place that we really love, and we are so happy to see it be revitalized. We couldn't ask for anything better than the things that you all have done in order to make this a better place. There's not very much I can say after we saw that presentation. So I think it's just very, very wonderful.
Well, thank you, Miss Lester. You have not only been a good supporter, but she's also given us some good feedback, constructively, as well as a lot of other community members that have been here for years. We continue to have some very challenging conversations where we will have tough conversations where we're asked to put on our big boy pants and go out and figure out how to do something and how to make sure that we're being intentional about how we address issues. But ultimately, I can truly say that we appreciate all of the community members and the residents that have really taken ownership of this process and have taken ownership of reaching out to us and holding us accountable as an organization. And so, again, this is community plan. We're happy that the community has really driven this process, and we want to make sure that we're executing on that vision. And so, as we close, let you go for the night, I want, again, to continue to reiterate that we want to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback. So again, please continue to reach out to us, go online, go through the plan, spend some time with it, and then, let us know your thoughts and where you think you can get involved on any of these steering committees and have an opportunity to really make an impact. So with that, we will sign off for the evening. And again, I appreciate you sharing your time with us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. So everybody have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Nice work.